All right, so we are live. Welcome everyone on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. And we're just going to wait a moment or two. Perfect. We are officially live. Wonderful. So, welcome everyone to our YouTube talk, Taino Resurgence. Welcome, welcome. We're going to just wait a few moments, a moment or two to just let people come on in. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Okay, again, for those that are just joining us, welcome to Julia de Burgos Taino Resurgence Talk. We are going to just let people come on in, get settled. I'm so excited to have Miguel back. Okay, so I officially want to welcome everyone to Julia de Burgos Cultural Arts Center Taino Resurgence Discussion. I'm Lynette Ramos, and I am an artist, a part of a collective initiative of the center called Unidos por Arte, or United by Art. Today we'll be discussing Taino spirituality with Miguel Sague. And again, I want to welcome everyone here. And what I'd like to do is just take a moment to just go over a brief bio, and then we'll welcome Miguel in. So Miguel Sague was born in Santiago, Cuba. He is a researcher and the author of Canoa, Taino Indigenous Dream River Journey, and that book is available at Amazon.com. He founded the Cane Indigenous Spiritual Circle in 1981, and he is currently in Taino language, Tequina, also known as a teacher. So welcome, Miguel. I'm so excited you're back. Thank you for being here.
I am really pleased and thrilled to be back with you, Lynette. And I want to thank you again for giving us an opportunity to represent what we do in this program.
Yes, thank you so much. So, thank you everyone for being here with us. Just want to give you kind of a brief overview of what the format will be. We're going to be doing an interview style, so we have some questions that we're going to be going over. Miguel will also be sharing his art and some music as well. And then, if we have time at the end, we'll be taking a few questions. So, I hope you enjoy this talk. And, as you're listening, think of any questions and put those in the chat, and that will be given to me. So let's start with our first question, Miguel. Again, I'm honored that you're here, very grateful for this interview today. And I want to begin by asking you, let's begin with how people identified with God in ancient versus modern times, and if you can also discuss the gender associations.
So, in the interpretation of the Kane Indigenous Spiritual Circle, which is the organization to which I belong,
Mhm.
the Taino way that we see the Great Spirit, we try to avoid the word God.
Mm.
The Great Spirit is a coherent, harmonized combination of two important elements of the cosmic spirituality.
Mhm.
One of those elements is female, and her name is Atabe, the cosmic matriarch. And the other one is male, and his name is Yokahu, the Lord of Life. And so Atabe and Yokahu are these two coherent, these two elements of spirituality, that when they come together, they form the balanced entity that we call Great Spirit. Actually, in the Taino language, we call them Yaya Guature, which the word actually is derived from the word Ya, and it's repeated 2 times. Ya, Ya. And what that means, Ya means soul. So when you repeat it 2 times, is the supreme soul, the most soul, the divine soul. So that's Yaya Guature, that's the Great Spirit. And the Great Spirit is conformed, the combination of these 2 divine entities. One Atabe, the other one Yokahu.
Beautiful. Okay, one more second. There we go. I almost lost my questions. So let's dive in a little bit more regarding the Great Spirit. And can you talk a little bit about the elements of both genders?
Okay, so the female entity that we're dealing with here, Atabe, is considered to be like a maternal entity. She is the mother of everything. She's not just the mother of Yokahu, the Lord of Life. She's the mother of all creation. And all of creation arises, emerges out of her womb. So her womb is this divine place, this divine origin place from which everything that exists comes. So here's the thing. In the most important aspect of our tradition that has survived the 500 years of domination and conquest is a record that was written down by a Catholic monk called Ramon Panet. And what he wrote down was everything that the people that he was interviewing, our ancestors, the Taino ancestors, were telling him. And so this was put together into a story that we in the Kane circle call the Taino Chronicles. So this story tells us that Yokahu was born of Atabe's womb, but not only that, that humanity, all humanity, emerged from a cave called Kasibahagua. Now we in the Kane circle interpret that as the birth of all humanity from Atabe's womb. And why do we say that? Well, cave is a metaphor, an opening on the surface of the earth. Atabe is Mother Earth. So any hole, any opening on the surface of the earth is an opening out of the womb of Atabe. So when we talk, when Ramon Panet heard these people talk about the emergence of humanity at the beginning of time from a cave, essentially what he was hearing was that all humanity was born from the very body of Atabe. Not only that, he also was told that the sun and the moon came out of a cave. This is actually part of the narration, of the sacred narration. The sun and the moon emerging from a cave also is a metaphor for the concept of everything being born out of the womb of Atabe. So this is the magnificent female, the all-mother of the Taino, Atabe. On the other hand, Yokahu, which is her balanced male element, he is the Lord of Life. He is associated, if you analyze his name, Yokahu, which we in the Kane circle interpret to mean the soul of the yucca plant. And for those who are not acquainted with what yucca plant is, because there may be somebody that is watching this, what is a yucca plant? It's not the yucca plant of the Southwest United States. That's not it. It's completely different. Yucca is a bushy, leafy plant that grows as a tall bush about the size of a human being, lots of palmate leaves that look like hands, and roots that grow like tubers, similar to a potato. So when this thing is uprooted, the nutritious element of this food plant is the root, the tuber. And that is such an important source of caloric energy to the Taino, the ancient Taino people, that it became the sacred plant, the sacred food. Just like in Chinese culture, rice is a sacred plant. Just like in European and Middle Eastern culture, wheat and the bread, what they call the daily bread, if you will, that's the sacred food. Well, to us Tainos, yuca and the derivative plant food, which is called the casabe, which is a bread that was made out of yuca, still is made out of yuca. That is the representation of all energy that we consume that allows us to live. So because this entity, Yokahu, is associated with yuca by his name, he represents life. He represents energy. And interestingly, even though his name refers to something that grows underground in the darkness of the ground, kind of like what we could consider the womb of Atabe. He's the son of Atabe, just like we are. So we kind of identify with him. We're children of Atabe. He's child of Atabe. We're alive. He's alive. He's life. We're life. So we identify with Yokahu. He's kind of like one of us, So even though he represents this plant that exists underground, he also is associated with the sun. Now, that's kind of like, whoa, how does that work? The sun is this entity that exists in the heavens, in the sky. So how are we to associate a solar entity, a divine heavenly body with something that grows underground? Well, here's the link. The rays of the sun are what brings the energy of the sun to Earth. Without the sun, without solar energy, there is no life on Earth, because life on Earth is just a manifestation here on Earth of solar energy. Solar energy comes down and makes life on Earth. And the way that we humans take this energy into our bodies is through an intermediary, green plants. Green plants stand out there in the sun and soak in that energy. And through the process of photosynthesis, through a magic substance in their tissues called chlorophyll, this magic substance turns solar energy into plant energy, and it's stored in the plant. And along come we and animals, and we eat the plant, and we take that solar energy into our body. So when you uproot the tuber, the yucca tuber, what you're uprooting is a gigantic storage of sunlight that has been stored there by the plant for weeks and months. And there it is waiting for you to eat and take all that solar energy inside you. So that's why Ramon Pane, when he asked, well, where does this Yokahu guy live? The Tainos told him, he lives in the sky. And that must have freaked him out. How does something that has the name of a tuber that grows on the ground live in the sky? Well, of course, he didn't understand what I just explained to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gave him something to think about. So let's talk about Atabe. How is she regarded as the mother and also associated with the earth and the ocean? We talked earlier and you gave examples about, the water being the bloodstream of earth and also the water composition similar to blood.
So yeah, let's go back to Atabe again.
Yeah.
She is maternal entity. And we in the Kanei circle understand that there is a very important link between the divine woman, Atabe, and the human woman, which is half of the population of the earth. And that link is the 28-day cycle of fertility. A human that has a human woman that has the capacity to give birth manifests that capacity in a cycle inside her body. It's a magical cycle that only takes place in the female part of human population. And that cycle manifests itself in the rise and fall of blood. So the rise and fall of blood in her body signals the 28-day cycle, this monthly cycle. Well, guess what? The same cycle exists in the womb of the divine woman, Atabe. And that cycle, unlike the cycle in human woman, which can be a very private cycle, nobody needs to know that that's going on. That can be a very private thing. But in the divine woman, it's a very public cycle. It manifests itself in the phases of the moon. So there you are. There's her monthly cycle manifesting itself in the phases of the moon herself, who we call Karaya. And that cycle affects the blood of the earth. What do we in the Kanay circle interpret to be the blood of the earth? The waters of the earth, the oceans, lakes, rivers, streams, lagoons, any water on the earth, that's the blood of the earth. So here we have this rise and fall of the blood of the earth that happens on a monthly basis. So just like in a human woman, the divine woman has a monthly cycle that manifests itself in the rise and fall of her blood.
As they say, as above, so below, right? It's
exactly.
Thank you. So let's dive in. You talked a little bit about Yokahu and why he's known as the Lord of Life and energy. Is there anything else that you think is important to say, maybe reflected in the physical, biological male or humanity as a whole?
Yes, actually, Yokahu is a manifestation of all life on earth, not just human life, animal life, plant life, especially plant life. After all, his name is the name of a plant. So all biological processes that take place on the surface of the earth, that's Yokahu, the Lord of Life. So I like to kid around. Jokingly, I tell people when I teach them about Yokahu that you can turn his name into a verb. When you're living, you're Yokahuing.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't think about the aspect of the animals and the plant life. We do have it's all inclusive, right? It's all living beings. Well, what would you say?
Life.
What would you say about like crystals or rocks? Because they also, I've heard that there's also an essence or an energy. Would they be included in that as well?
There is an interesting portion of the Taino Chronicles. We call it the Taino Chronicles. A lot of people just call it the writings of Ramon Panay. And there's different episodes that are actually associated to the source of the three main realms of existence. I shouldn't say existence. The things that form what is on Earth. The plant realm, the animal realm, and the mineral realm. Okay, so the plant kingdom gets its origin from a part of the legend where a person, a man is sent out of the primordial cave to get healing plants. And when he finds them, he doesn't come back, but keeps them all to himself selfishly. And then, as a punishment, he's turned into a bird. And by doing that, he is responsible for creating the realm of animals. There's another group of people that are sent out to get food and bring it back to the primordial cave to the people that are living there. They also are selfish, go to a place to fish, and they keep all the fish to themselves. They are turned into trees. And by doing that, they populate the earth with plants. So that's the realm of the plants. You got the realm of the animals, realm of the plants. There's one guy, and his name is Makokael, who was given the responsibility to stand at the entrance of the cave and look out all the time to make sure and find out when the world was ready for humans to emerge from the cave, and then they could be the cacique, the chief, who was called Wahayona, could then bring the people out. But this guy didn't do his job. He was late one time to come to the entrance of the cave, and he was punished by being turned into a pile of rocks. So that is the mineral realm. And so these 3 episodes of the creation narrative gives us the source of the 3 very important aspects of reality. Each one comes from a person. So these things are seen as retaining as an element of life. So when you work with a crystal, you are dealing with something that has a form of life and energy, but of its own. So you're dealing with that, and that's a very important aspect of our tradition. Our ancestors come from the rainforests of South America. The Tainos actually came out to the Caribbean islands from the South American rainforest. Like the Amazon. A lot of people are acquainted with the Amazon. Well, there's another river that runs parallel to the Amazon and it shares in that culture, and it's called the Orinoco River Basin. That Orinoco River is the homeland of the ancestors of the Taínos, who set out on canoes to populate the Caribbean islands. If you go back there to the Orinoco River area and you look at the traditions of the indigenous people that still live there, you will see that some of them use crystals in a very important, they have a very important role in their healing practices and their energy practices.
Thank you for inspiring another trip. I think that I have to visit that. That's amazing. Thank you. So would you please elaborate on how the Caribbean Sea came into being and the relation with uterine or amniotic fluid?
So the Taino chronicles, the ancient legends of the Taino, as they were narrated to this priest, Ramon Pane, this monk. He really wasn't a priest, he was a monk. Tell us that in ancient times, there was the first human who was called Yaya Lokuo. He had the same name as the Great Spirit. I told you that the Great Spirit is named Yaya Guaturei. Well, the first human was called Yaya Lokuo. Yaya Lokuo lived in his home after they had come out of the cave, the primordial cave Casibahagua. They came and populated the earth, and one of those people was the first human being, Yaya Lokuo. His son did not get along with Yaya Loco. His name was Yayael, which means child of Yaya. So child of Yaya, Yayael, did not get along with Yaya. And they quarreled so much that Yaya told him to leave. He had to go off and be by himself for 4 months. And he was. And when he tried to come back, he came back just as quarrelsome as he had been before. So much that they got into such a violent altercation, him and Yaya, that Yaya got killed. So Yaya, of course, Yaya Loco was very sad. He didn't want Yaya El to die. So he did the funerary services in the tradition of the Tainos, which you bury the body, and after a year or two, when it has decomposed, you unearth the bones. Sometimes they would cremate them and turn them into a powder, and those pieces of bone and powder were put into a gourd. Now, this is not just like the gourds that you have that we are acquainted with in North America that grow along the ground. The gourd I'm talking about is called higuera, and they grow as very large. They grow as a fruit in the higuera tree, so they hang from the higuera tree. They're green when they're hanging there, but when you take them out and you let it dry, they turn brown. This object has become symbolic of the womb of Atabey because it has seeds inside. So it's kind of like this thing that has the promise of life inside it, just like a womb. So the ancient Tainos used to put a hole on this thing, cut a hole on top, take out all of the inside, dry it, and then use it as a water container. But also, it could be used as a receptacle for the remains of a person that had died. So he put the bones of his son inside this object and hung it from strings from the ceiling of his house. Then he went out to cultivate the fields, to cultivate the yucca and the corn, the maize, tomatoes, all the things that he was growing out there, peanuts. Along came these 4 boys who were quadruplets. They had been born of the same womb of a sacred woman called Itiba Kahubaba, who, by the way, happened to be the human manifestation of Atabey. So in essence, the way we see it, Atabey had come down to earth, taken on physical human attributes, had these 4 children, and then she died in childbirth, and then her soul went back to being Atabey. And she left these 4 children. These were the promise of the future Tainos. So these 4 children, they had a great legacy, a great future. But instead of manifesting that beautiful legacy, they were really jerks. They did not behave. They were rude. They would come into the homes of the elders and would tease them, would abuse them. So they had heard that Yaya Loco had a gourd in his house, and that the bones of Yayael had turned into seawater, and that seawater had fish swimming around in it. So what a magical thing. We want to see it. So they came to the house when Yaya was out there cultivating the fields, and they took the gourd down, this big gourd, and they looked inside, and sure enough, the bones of Yayael had turned into fish and were swimming around inside there. So what did they do? They started eating it. They started eating the fish. So when they heard Yaya coming back, the three of the boys ran out, and the oldest of the boys, who was called Deminan Caracaracol, he tried to hang the gourd back up, and he's trying to hook the ropes, but he dropped it. And down it fell, and it broke, and out starts coming all this water with all these fish, and it starts filling up the low places, and it just keeps coming out. And Deminan and his three brothers are running away, and all this water is coming out, and the water filled up all the hollow places, and it turned into the Caribbean Sea.
It seems like some of the mistakes that we made at the beginning of our time turned into something really beautiful. So that's interesting. That seems to be a theme.
Yes.
All right. So the Taino were a matriarchal society. Would you elaborate on what that means and how that changed over time?
Yes, that's actually not an uncommon situation. A lot of indigenous people, people that are very closely associated with the earth, um, if they turn into agricultural people, which the Tainos were, there's other indigenous people that have a tendency to be more hunter-gatherer, and they focus most of their food gathering attention on hunting. And usually the focus of the social political makeup of those abilities has a tendency to be more male oriented. But in the case of agricultural people, if the culture starts tending towards agriculture, the culture itself, the social political structure, has a tendency to become more female oriented. And one of the theories of how that happens is that really the fundamental status of human society, hunter gatherer, usually is gender. There's a gender relationship with how food is acquired. Men do all of the hunting, or mostly men do the hunting, and the women have a tendency to do the gathering. That's picking out foods, picking out the right foods, the more nutritious foods. They have that skill and that knowledge of what plants are the ones that are going to be more nutritious. So what happens is that in certain environments where you have very fertile soil, or the environment lends itself to agriculture, the women essentially find out that all they have to do is, instead of going out and gathering the food, they can bring seeds and start cultivating it right there close to the village. So they don't have to be wandering around all the time, and that creates more stationary villages. So you have people building houses that are not tents anymore. They're more like more substantial structures. That's what happened to the Tainos. Tainos became agricultural people. They were there was some hunting done. The men did hunt ducks and other birds. They hunted hutillas, which are these big rodent animals. They did a lot of fishing and collecting of shellfish and things like that. But the women got busy and were planting yucca and maize, corn, and tomatoes and potatoes and a bunch of other food plants. And that became the real basis of their economy. Because of that, women attained a very important social and political status in Taino culture. The lineage, the inheritance of a family went through the mother's line as opposed to the father's line. You inherited your mother's family name and family. And so, and also, even the political leadership, which usually was a man, you usually had a male chief, but these male chiefs were chosen and elevated to that position by a group of women called the clan mothers. So even the political authority was granted to the chief by women.
This topic of conversation to me has been one of the most eye-opening and fascinating things, because in this way, or this idea, the feminine was the beginning. And I think it's ironic that in many religions and in modern day, the feminine has been removed, or it's almost like it's been demoted. So what do you think? Some people would say that that's why some of the imbalances occur in our society, is because we don't have that harmony between the male and the female, whether it's biologically or whether it's spiritually. What would you say about that?
Yeah, that's a very important gift that we can inherit from our Taino ancestors, is that sense of balance between the genders, the male and the female. If we learn to adapt that mentality to our modern thinking, I think it would really progress. It would be a big step forward in our evolution as a society. So there's a lot of value in ancient Taino mentality and ancient Taino thinking. It's not some obsolete way of thinking. In fact, we in the NA circle nos esmeramos. We really put a lot of work into adapting ancient Taino tradition to modern life, urban life, because so many of our people live in urban environments. So many modern Caribbean people live in cities, and so we like to take that ethos of ancient Taino tradition and bring it to the point where we can live with it in a city. And there's nothing wrong with going back to the natural environment. Heaven knows there's plenty of it still left in our islands. We can feel at home in the same jungles and the same beaches, the same wonderful natural environment that our ancestors evolved in. And we can recharge our batteries as indigenous people in that environment. But not all of us can enjoy that on a regular basis all the time. And some of us live in urban environments. We have to bring that magic with us to the urban environment. And that's what we really work hard at doing in the Kane Circle, to bring the energy of that spirituality into the urban environment so we can enjoy it here too, so we can thrive with it here also.
Thank you. So someone that is coming in new or looking to integrate the past into modern day times or the future, what would you say is important? Why do we need to understand what someone may call a mythology or our past? Why is it important today?
You know, when we look at the stories, and certainly the Kane Circle has gone through a lot of trouble to express these ancient traditions in our videos that we make accessible through YouTube, and the text material that we make accessible in our blogs. There's a place called the Indigenous Caribbean Network where we have actually made all of this stuff public. We also have a wonderful website which you can find just by googling the word Kane Circle, and if you just Google the word Kane Circle, CANEY Circle, you can go to our website. There's a wealth of information on this. And what we have made clear in those portals, in those places, is how to adopt ancient Taino tradition to modern life. The Taino Chronicles, the legends, there are lessons in those legends. Of course, we don't see the Taino Chronicles as literal history. No sacred writings or sacred mythology should be seen as literal history. It would be a mistake to do that. We see it as metaphorical teachings. When we talk about human beings coming out of a cave, humanity coming out of a cave, the metaphorical meaning is that we are children of the earth, and that is true. We are children of the earth, okay? We are made up of elements that come from the earth. There's nothing in a human body that doesn't come from the earth. If you analyze, you take a human body and break it down to its elements, everything that's there is stuff that you find on the earth, okay? In the soil, in the air, in the water. So you take all that stuff to make a human being. So we are children of this planet. So we are children of Atabe. So we see that imagery, that metaphorical imagery of human beings being born out of this cave, Kasibahagwa. It's a representation of the fact that we are born of the earth. And so you can go to any part of the story of the Taino Chronicles, and every one of them is a wonderful metaphorical teaching about reality of human life. Makokael not keeping his task and being punished. That's a lesson. The fishermen and women that went out to fish and did not bring the fish back and they were turned into trees. That's a lesson. These are moral teachings, ethical teachings. And there's a lot of other stories that I cannot go into right now because it's a long story. But it's available, like I said, on our website.
Yeah, I mentioned this before. You can spend literally, I think, years and years just going through the information. You've done an amazing job. It really is fascinating, the work that you've done. So thank you for that. So what I'd like to do at this time is let's switch gears and let's showcase and talk a little bit about your art. So I have some pictures of your art and you also have some pieces there. So if you don't mind first starting with your environment and tell us a little bit about what you have surrounding you.
Well, let's start with the guy that we talked about before, Deminan. The guy that walked into that house and brought the gourd down and broke it, okay? Because something happened to him. He got his comeuppance for being such a rude knucklehead. He, after getting away, him and his 3 brothers, getting away and running, he went to another house where there was an old man who was a bohitiu. That's a behique that is a very specialized behique who does journeying. It's a shaman. So, you know, behiques are spiritual guides, but bohitius are very specialized behiques who do shamanic journey and healings. So this man who was called Yamanako. He was sitting there minding his own business, doing what I call a shamanic journey. His soul was going to the realm of non-ordinary reality. And there he was, and these guys come into his house, all four of them, okay? The Minan and his three brothers. And they start doing what they normally do. Hey, let's get some food. Hey, grandfather, how you doing? They call him grandfather. Hey, how you doing? We're going to come in here and look for some food. So he just sat there calmly and watched them as they rummaged through his house. And then all of a sudden, he puts his thumb up to his nostril like this, and woo! He blows a big gob of snot on the back of Deminan. Now, Deminan is freaking out. You nasty old man! What did you do that for? You blew this nasty gob of. Ugh! He's slimy and nasty and all. You horrible old man. But then his back starts to hurt. And he starts like, oh, it hurts, it hurts. And then it starts to swell. And there's the back, his back begins to swell. He gets a big lump on his back. And then he's screaming and yelling, it hurts. So his brothers are trying to help him. What's with you, Deminan? Can we help you? My back hurts. This guy, he did something to my back. So they run out. And he's rolling around on the ground. And his brothers, they don't know what to do. So they get a sharp stone, like a knife or a hatchet, and they open up his back. Here's Deminan is screaming, and the back, the cut begins to open, and out comes a giant turtle. This turtle comes climbing out of Deminan's back. Now, we in the Kane circle have interpreted this as the turtle represents the energy of compassion. We believe that compassion was trapped inside these four boys all their lives, but they kept it. They wouldn't let it come out. And here, by Yamanako, this wise old man had forced compassion out of Deminan's back. Out came this turtle. It was a female turtle. And it turned into a beautiful human woman who represented compassion. And she, through the energy of her very energy of her presence, it turns out that these four boys were actually one boy with a split personality. You know, like those the people with the multiple personality disorder.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Deminan was. So these four boys joined and became a coherent unity. She healed them, and it was all done through compassion. And now Deminan, which is actually this sculpture here, is Deminan. I'm going to show them to you. This is actually a replica of an object that is now housed at the Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. And you can see on his back, the big lump on his back, that's where the turtle came out of this lump. All right? And you can, if you ever have an opportunity to visit the Museum of the American Indian, which is part of the Smithsonian complex, you can see the statue there, the Minan Caracaracol. He became the first Taino man. Caguana, Caguama, the turtle woman, was the first Taino woman. and they became the first Taino family. And from them came all of us. So that, again, that's not to be taken literally. That is a beautiful, poetic, metaphorical story of, and it teaches all kinds of ethical lessons.
Beautiful. And what about the one in front of you?
This is representation of Yokahu, the Lord of Life. This is one of the most common ways in which he is represented. He's represented like a 3-point object, what they call the 3-point stone. And it, in a way, is associated with a mountain, because in Taino culture, mountains are one of the representations of the male energy of the earth. So here he is in the shape of a mountain. And there's a wonderful museum in Boriquén, which is the Taino word for Puerto Rico, that is actually shaped like this object. And anybody that has an opportunity to visit the homeland, to visit Boriquén, to visit Puerto Rico, ought to visit that place.
I'm lucky enough to be in San Juan. I'm actually in a hotel room, and I'm going to be visiting that place. And so I look forward to sharing my footage. So that's amazing. Thank you.
That's a real thrill.
Yes, very grateful.
So this object here, this is a representation of a very important spirit. We call the Taino word for spirit is semi. So we call them all semis. This is a semi. That's a semi. The manifestation of Atabey that you are going to be visiting in Caguana, very close to Utuado, that's a semi. So the semis are all the divine spirits. So that one there represents Boinayel. Boinayel is the spirit of rain. And if you look carefully right there, these are grooves that represents the tracks of his tears. We believe that Boinayel's tears have the magic of rain. And so he takes the tears from his eyes and he can use those tears. They multiply and they become the rainstorm that comes down. Not the destructive rainstorms of the hurricane, but the soothing, gentle rain of early spring or mid-spring. That's what we need to nourish the plants as they grow from the conuco fields, the cultivated fields. So that's who he is. This is not made by me. This was woven by a wonderful lady who is married to one of our Taino Mexiques, Lisa Sayas. And it represents a pictograph. It's a pictograph. That it was found in a cave in Cuba, which is where I was born. I was born in another Caribbean island not too far from Puerto Rico, Cuba. And in that cave is this drawing. And this is a representation of Gwei, the sun spirit. So she did a marvelous job with this beautiful weaving.
She really did. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to be sharing my screen and I'm going to be showing some of Miguel's art. All right, so okay. So let me.
There's Boriquén.
All right, so let me. All right, so you can see that there, right?
Okay, so this is a painting that is an allegorical representation of a very holy woman who lives in my island in Cuba. Her name is Idalis, and she is the daughter of the main cacique of the Cuban Taino community of Caridad de los Indios. And you can see the allegory in the background are the sun and the moon, which in the Taino creation narrative came out of the cave of Iguanaboina. And you can see the sun and the moon, but also you can see the drawing, the pictograph of the sun and the moon on there, just as they are seen in the cave in Cuba. In her hand, she holds the staff that represents Cuba in the event that happens every 4 years, which is called the Journeys for Peace and Dignity. And that staff, I can show it to you when we come back live. It's a feathered staff that was carved out of Cuban mahogany wood. I carved it, and has been carried from the United States all the way to Central America during the runs. These are ceremonial runs of the Journeys for Peace and Dignity. They were actually, people actually run these staffs. This is not the only one. Staffs representing Native communities from all over North America, all the way from Alaska to Texas and California and everywhere in North America, were run by young runners all the way to Central America. And by the same token, similar staffs were run from South America north through South America, and they all met in Central America, had this big get together. And so that staff was part of all those hundreds of staffs that were there. Below her is a representation of a wooden sculpture that serves as a seat. It has that curved sway back surface. That's what the ancient Tainos used. The people that were like chiefs and medicine men and women would sit on these seats with 4 legs. And that one there is now in the Museum Bacardi in the city of Santiago, Cuba. And of course, all around the image is the flamboyant flowers, which are very traditional of the Caribbean islands. You can find those flowers on trees in every Caribbean islands: Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba. Everywhere you go in the Caribbean, you can see those flowers.
Beautiful. So let's go to the next one.
This is a representation of a bejique, a female bejique. She is shaking her rattle and singing. The song is called Invoking the Ancestors, Invocando los Ancestros. And behind her, of course, is a representation of Deminan, who was the first Taino man. And there he is, the ancestor. And behind that is the moon, because the moon, as I said before, is a representation of the cyclic energy of creativity inside a woman's body. You know, the lunar cycles. In front of her is a container that is burning tabonuco, which is the incense that we use to purify a sacred space. And in front there, on the floor, on the ground, is a mayoacan drum, which is the log drum that the ancient Tainos and modern day Tainos use for our chants, our songs.
Beautiful. So the next one.
This is a duho. It's that stool that I told you about. I carved this out of black cherry wood, which has been used by indigenous people all over Central America also. Uh, it's called capulín in Spanish. And I carved this one for a very good friend of mine, the chief of the Taino community of um, um, I can't remember Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So there's a large Puerto Rican community in Lancaster, and he is the cacique of the Taino community there. And I carved this for him to sit on.
Wonderful.
That is a painting that actually depicts the stone that you will be visiting in Jayuya. That is the piedra escrita. That stone sits in the middle of a stream. It's a gigantic boulder. It's about the size of a small house. And on it are some of the most well-known petroglyphs in the Taino Resurgence movement. Most important of all is a little representation of a frog called the coqui. And so when you go there, look for that stone. That's the piedra escrita stone. In front of it is my son. That I painted him. That's the picture of him when he was in his 20s. And he would dress up in this Taino dance regalia for the powwow here in Pittsburgh. So that's him dancing there. His name is Miguel, like me. And of course, there's a representation of the three-pointed stone of Yokahu, the Lord of Life, enshrined inside the center of a sun. And that's Yokahu, the Lord of Life. I call this Dances the Rock. And this is again that statue that I showed you earlier that's sitting behind me here, Boinayel. I think here you can see a little bit better the grooves under his eyes that represent the tracks of his tears. The incrustations on the earlobes and his teeth are made out of conch seashell. And the incrustation in his eyes are made out of abalone shell. The wood is capulín, black cherry.
Thank you so much. So the last time when you were talking about the first painting that we saw, and as you were talking, in my mind I was thinking it would be amazing if he sang, but I didn't want to say anything, and then you ended up singing anyway. So would you mind, sharing a song and maybe telling us a little bit about the song?
Yes, I'm going to actually sing a song that has become quite a hit in Europe. And the story of how that happened is kind of bizarre. It was we recorded it in the 1990s, early 1990s, 1991. The Canadian Circle recorded that. We released it as part of a compendium of songs in a cassette tape. You don't see those anymore. And people, not a whole lot of people bought it. I mean, there's a few people bought it in Canada.
Yeah.
And this German children's music promoter heard it in Canada. He brought it back, recorded it, and he did a translation into German that essentially was kind of more or less what we were saying in the Taino language, homage to Atabe, the cosmic matriarch, the Mother Earth. And he released it and became a huge hit in Germany. Go figure. This is the song. It's called chant to Atabe, the cosmic matriarch, but in Germany it's known simply as Taino T, which means high honors to you. Taino T wakiata, Taino T wakiata, Taino T wakiata, Taino T wakiata. Are tu are to today, are tu are patabe, Taino T wakiata, Taino T wakiata. Araya warishana, Karaya warishana. Taino Tiwapiata, Taino Tiwapia.
Beautiful. And would you mind doing one more? Are there any songs associated with the male aspect, or maybe another song that, is important to the ancestors? Or
Yeah, we have a song that's dedicated to Yahu, the Lord of Light. And the words say, high honors to you, Taino Ti, great gratitude to you, Bomatung, Wakia Baba, our Father, who dwells in the heavens. Yeah. Taino Ti Bomatung, Wakia Baba Turei Toka. Taino Ti Bomatung, Wakia Baba Turei Toka. Taino Ti Bomatung, Wakia Baba Turei Toka. Yokahuba Wapaora Toki, Wakia Baba Turei Toka. Yokahuba Wapaora Toki, Wakia Baba Turei Toka. Taino Ti Bomatung, Wakia Baba Turei Toka. Taino Ti Bomatung, Wakia Baba Turei Toka. Aku babai, aku to, Turei Toka. Aku babai, aku to, Turei Toka. Taino Ti Bomatung, Wakia Baba Turei Toka. Taino Ti Bomatung, Wakia Baba Turei Toka.
beautiful. Thank you. All right. So what I'd like to do is just invite, we have a little bit of time left. And if anyone has any questions, they can go ahead and submit them into the chat. So while we're waiting for questions, Miguel, we talked about the foundational aspects of Taino spirituality. Based on what we've talked about so far, is there anything else that you think is important to say about what we talked about, and also about us moving forward in the integration of some of these things?
Yeah, I think it's very important for modern day Tainos to find a way to integrate these ancient traditions into their present life, to find ethical teachings, moral teachings from the stories of the Taino chronicles, to adapt that into their personal life and make their life their path, the path that they walk. Something that rhymes, that jives with those teachings that come from our ancestors. And it's amazing how much these teachings fit into modern life. If you learn the old stories, the old traditions, the story of Guabonito, the hero woman, and how she interacts with Guajayona, the original chief, how she heals him, how he learns the lesson, because he makes these great mistakes, grave errors in his life. And it takes this woman to heal his body and his mind so that he comes out of that healing place a new person. All of these wonderful stories that you will find in our website. They teach you how to live your life.
And, you know, right now we're in a really interesting time. There's a lot of polarity and just transformation and change. And for some, it could be a scary time. For others, they're looking at it more optimistically. So again, considering our past, what is a teaching or something that maybe is an important, it's something, a concept that's important, especially today, to maybe help restore harmony, or feeling safe, or being able to get through these times?
We actually see these times as necessary times that humanity had to go through in the transition from one era to the other. You know, our Taino ancestors were associated through trade, interaction with people that have always lived in Central America. Among those people are the Maya people. And the Tainos and the Mayas are known historically to have traded with each other not only physical material goods, but also ideas. And some of these ideas we feel we inherited. And part of that is the whole idea of measuring time into certain phases. We believe that one of those phases is now ending and transitioning into another time. Transitions like these can always be painful. They're like a birth. You know, a birth, there's an element of pain in birth. And we believe that humanity is going through a birthing process right now. And that birthing process is painful. We have to work at it. It's not something that's going to happen by itself. This birthing process could end very badly. If we don't put work into it, it can be catastrophic to humanity. So this is a pivotal moment in human history that we have to work at coming out successfully. And once we come out, we will be reborn and be a completely new, renewed species. But we have to work at it.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've learned in my research, you know, even Taino events, one thing that I thought was really interesting is that you don't have to be in a specific Taino group or even of that faith to be invited or welcomed into your events and gatherings. And I think that that's important, especially now with people having different ways of living and religions and spiritual paths. So we have some things to learn about that. So why is it that Tainos, especially in these groups or gatherings, why is it that everyone is involved? Because that's not really always common in certain spiritual or religious paths.
So yes, I mean that. Let me make this clear to you. It does happen in some groups. There are some groups that are very exclusive. I'm talking about Taino groups that can be exclusive and will not accept a participant who is not completely committed or who may not be a Taino. Our group is not one of those. Our group, the Kane Indigenous Spiritual Circle, is very welcoming. We have regular ceremonies, you know, which, by the way, have been disrupted by the COVID. You know, the coronavirus has wreaked havoc. But we normally would have ceremonies on a regular basis that happen every month on the full moon, every month on the new moon, and then winter solstice, equinox, solstices, and other times. Everybody is welcome to that. We welcome anybody that comes respectfully do that because we feel that we have something to offer to the whole world. I see we got some questions.
Yes. So I have wanted to practice our spirituality. Is it possible to be a modern Taino spiritual leader and practicer?
Yes, I mean, in the Canadian Indigenous Spiritual Circle, every spiritual leader is a modern spiritual leader, just simply by the fact that we live in the 21st century. So what we do is we have adapted the ancient traditions to fit 21st century life. I mean, we live here now in a world of computers and interactive interaction over thousands of miles via Zoom and YouTube. And that's one of the ways in which we interact with each other in a spiritual way. We, of course, also do in person ceremonies. That's the core of what we do. We gather in different places wherever we have a Taino, I'm sorry, a Kane Circle Behique. That Kane Circle Behique has the responsibility to lead ceremonies every moon on the equinoxes, the solstices, and to invite people to come to those ceremonies. And so we do gather in person and have these manifestations of our spirituality. You can also do it in private, in your own house. We can manifest our spirituality in any way that you can, and we actually give you an opportunity to do that in our website. How to either participate in one of our group ceremonies or how to do it at your own house yourself with your family.
It's very detailed. You know, even something as simple as how you start your day or working with the water in the shower. You really do give some beautiful examples. So, you know, I do recommend people that are interested. And we talked about this the last time. It's, you know, there's a lot of online resources, and Miguel started this almost what 40 years ago, right? So there everything is really listed, and we can even put we'll put a link in the YouTube for the replay. We'll put a link to the website, because anyone who's interested, I mean, it's like a blueprint. It's very detailed. So okay, so the next question is, I'm a DJ and music producer of Taino heritage, and I want to make Taino remixes much like A Tribe Called Red. Is that ethically okay? I don't want to disrespect our ancestors. And this is a beautiful question. And we talked a little bit about artist interpretation last time. So this is a great question.
What's the name of the person?
I don't have the name of the person. If they would like to share their name.
Okay, so it's a male or female? Can I call him?
I don't have. Awesome Prime is the person asking.
Awesome Prime. Okay, Awesome Prime.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love
Awesome
that
Prime. First of all, there is a lot of variety in the thinking in the Taino Resurgence movement. Like any movement of any kind, if you're acquainted with social movements like this one, you will realize that pretty much every group in the movement has its own perception of what is acceptable and what is not. So I'm going to share with you what we feel is appropriate and acceptable. As a DJ, you're a musical person. I'm also a musical person, I want to tell you. Besides being an artist, I'm also a musician. I play the guitar. I was a leader of a salsa band during the whole decade of the 90s. So I'm really immersed in the whole musical environment. And I still perform to this day. You can use this music, certainly the music that we produce, in what you do. If you're doing it respectfully, it's okay, because that's a human expression of this tradition. And so if you're doing it with respect, if you're doing it, if in your heart it's respectful, that's the way to do it. And we have no problem with that.
Yeah. And Miguel, would you elaborate like you did last time when you talked about that even in your own paintings, you take certain techniques that our ancestors use and you also incorporate new techniques. So isn't that the way of the artist?
Exactly. That's right. So when we take up a piece of art like that, that's very traditional. Wood, shell. But this object here was made out of concrete. So it's not a stone, it's concrete. So that's a more a different kind of medium, but that doesn't make it any less sacred in our perception. Now there may be some Tainos out there because I told you there's a wide variation of how what people think. In the Kane circle, you can make a sacred object out of any medium that you imbue with that sacredness. This originally was a drawing in a cave, but now it's a weaving in a bag. And to me, this is sacred. This painting, the Tainos did not have oil painting, okay? But I have adapted this medium, oil paint, and that has become a sacred manifestation of art for me in this era. Mm-hmm. And this is important to understand. Even in ancient times, artistic expression evolved. Archaeologists can show you the evolution of artistic expression of ancient Tainos from the time that their ancestors first came out of South America and began to settle on the islands to the time that Columbus arrived over 1,000 years later. The art didn't stay static. We are not a museum piece. We're living, breathing, evolving, living things. And like any living thing, everything about us evolves.
And do you mind showing us the staff that you mentioned earlier that's in the painting that has the feather?
Yes, this is actually a replica of a sculpture that was discovered in a flooded region in the northern part of Cuba, and it represents Yokahu, the Lord of Life. And this is the staff that was run from New York City all the way to Central America in 2016. It has hawk feathers. The hawk is a sacred bird in Taino culture because hawks, the Buteo jamaicensis is the native hawk of the Caribbean, the red-tailed hawk. And this it's called the red-tailed hawk because these the tail feathers have a kind of a reddish brown color. I don't know if you can see it there. Yeah. As a reddish brown color. So when the bird flies and the sunlight shines through it, it looks reddish. And that is the red-tailed hawk. We call it guaraguao.
Perfect. So I have, okay, here's another question. How do we begin to bridge our various, I'm not sure what that word is.
Yucayeques.
Thank you. I believe it is going to happen through prayer and ayeretos, not to mention,
Areitos.
Thank you, not to mention the natural celestial epics.
Absolutely. I agree with this relative. The Yucayeques, by the way, are the groups that I told you about. You know, the Taino Resurgence movement right now manifests itself principally in the form of organizations of people, groups of people that coalesce into these communities. They're not always physical communities all living in one place, even though that does exist. There are these people that all live in the same city, and they form a Yucayeke, and that's the Yucayeke of that city. We'd love to see a Yucayeke form in Cleveland one of these days. I look forward to that. But there's also virtual Yucayecas that see themselves united by their interactions on the internet. Right? So these communities sometimes have a leader, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're more loosely associated. Unfortunately, there has been some friction and division among the Yucayecas of the Taino Resurgence movement. And I think what this questioner, this person, is alluding to is, how do we bring that together? How do we break through the conflicts, the history of negative interaction? I totally agree. One of the things that this questioner, if you look at the question again, refresh my memory, I think they mentioned prayer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they said, is it going to happen through prayer and ayeritos?
Prayer is a very important element of this. Certainly, as a member of the leadership of a spiritual group like the Canadian Indigenous Spiritual Circle, prayer is the ultimate answer. But also, areitos are important, because an areito is a communal get together. It's a part spiritual, part social get together of people who come together physically to express our Taino culture. It is comparable to some extent to the North American native powwow, where there's expression of dance, art, spirituality, art. That's the way we feel areitos. The ancient Tainos used to have areitos all the time, and I think, and we've had areitos in the present. They don't happen as often as I wish they would, but I agree with the questioner. We need more areitos, and we're looking for them to happen.
Yes, I think it's happening. I think it's happening. I think it'll show itself. But yes, I look forward to that. So we've talked about a lot, spirituality, the art. Any closing thoughts? Anything that you want to leave us with?
I would like to talk about global disease. And global disease, as it has manifested itself this year in a very tragic way, it is a form of transition. I think we'll all see when we come out of this that we're going to come out as a species, humanity-wise, throughout the whole world, going through this trial. Some of us will feel stronger. I don't belittle the suffering and the defeat, the feeling of the sense of defeat in many people, especially those who have lost relatives and loved ones. No one can deny that tragedy. I would like to think, however, that as a species, as humanity as a whole, we should have the power to come out stronger from this trial. And I think Taino tradition should play an important role in that, in the healing process of humanity as a whole, in the resurgence of humanity from this time of darkness. That's what I think.
Beautifully said. Miguel, as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for spending your time with us, sharing in your wisdom and your artistry. I mean, you're a beautiful being all the way around, and I appreciate the time that you spend here with us.
Thank you, Lynette. You are a blessing to the whole Taino Resurgence movement. I love these interviews that you're doing. Keep it up. And my most fervent gratitude to Julia de Burgos Center. Thank you all. And also, oh boy, our friend who is over there managing.
Oh, Mackenzie.
Mackenzie,
Thank you, Mackenzie.
bless you. I know you're invisible. Nobody can see you back there, but you're the one that's making this thing happen. Bless you, Mackenzie. Bless you.
I want to thank everyone who joined us today live, or if you happen to watch the replay. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed yourself and learned something. Also, we are accepting donations on Miguel's behalf. We would love to just offer a beautiful exchange for his time and his wisdom. So if you'd like to tip or offer a donation to Miguel, you can please contact Julia de Burgos. And let me look. We'll put it in the notes, but I thought I had, oh, here it is. The email for Julia de Burgos is info@juliadeburgos.org. So any donations from Miguel, we would appreciate it. So again, thank you so much.